All of the old school gaming systems are making a return with mini versions. We've seen the original mini PlayStation, the mini Super NES, and even a mini original Nintendo Classic. Well, Sega doesn't want to be left out, and today we're going to see how this tiny guy works from the inside. Let's get started. Well, I think it's time we talk about the elephant in the room. If you had a Sega growing up, you were probably only half as cool as the kid with the Nintendo down the street. But hey, something is better than nothing. My mom only let me have a Game Boy as a kid. Probably so I would turn out normal or something, which I totally did. Sonic the Hedgehog is Sega's claim to fame, and this mini console does come with 3 of those games, along with 39 other titles built right into the console. Mega hits everyone's heard of, like Earthworm Jim, Golden Axe, and Don't Fall Off the Ladder while hanging Christmas lights or you might break your wrist. You know, the classics. Inside of the box we get an instruction booklet, along with a tiny 5-watt USB charger, 2 Genesis controllers, we'll have to take these apart in a second. Both of them communicate with a 6-foot-long USB cable that plugs right into the console. There is a micro USB power cord, along with an HDMI cable. Finally, we get the Sega Genesis Mini in its own little tiny cardboard box. Right here in all of its glory. The full-size version was released in Japan in 1988. 16-bit graphics were a pretty big deal back then. Nintendo wouldn't release a 16-bit system for 2 more years in 1990. But then after that, Nintendo kinda took over. For a graphical reference, the Game Boy only had 8-bit graphics. The top slot does have springy doors that open up, but no pins inside, and no cartridges. We'll have to see if this hole leads anywhere in just a second. There is one other random little door off to the side, which has nothing under it, and goes nowhere. Not sure if this has anything to do with the original system or not. To get inside of the Sega Genesis Mini, there are 6 Phillips head screws holding on the back plastic panel. Once those are out, I can pull off the top, exposing the motherboard, and the underside of the top plastics. We can see here that the little cartridge slot in the top is just for aesthetics. Pretty cool that it opens up though. You could totally hide all kinds of stuff in here. The mini Nintendo versions just had solid pieces of plastic covering these slots, so Sega's attention to detail is pretty nice. The back side of the console has its micro USB power port, along with the HDMI output. The 2 USB ports for the controllers are on the front. I'll pull off the metal heat plate over the motherboard. It's got 3 screws of its own. When the metal plate comes off, we can see that there is a tiny square of thermal foam on top of the processor. No fans or anything, just a simple board and metal plate for the heat dissipation, kind of like how smartphones work. The motherboard has 1 more screw holding it to the base, and there's nothing else really super interesting down here. The upper side of the board has the power slider and reset button. What is pretty interesting though is that the volume slider on the exterior is just for decoration. There is nothing connecting that slider to anything inside of the console, so controlling the volume of the console will be done through the HDMI and the TV. I wonder how many people got tricked by that button. Probably like all 5 of them who bought this. Well, 6 including me. With the metal plate back on, we can see that there is an LED built right into the motherboard, and this shines up through the power on light on top of the console. The LED is pretty far away from the actual exterior though. Once I get the console put back together, I can set it off to the side and grab the 3-button Genesis controller. These guys have the 6-foot cable, which is a huge perk over the 3-foot controller cable that came with the mini Nintendo Classic. Once the 6 Phillips head screws on the back of the controller are removed, I can pop off the back of the controller, exposing a bone-white circuit board. I'll be super careful with the removal because bones are bones and bones can break. It's green on the other side. Each of the exterior plastic buttons are solid plastic, and each of them have custom fins on the back that only allow the correct button to fall into the correct corresponding hole. We've seen similar fail-safe assembly designs in basically every controller we've taken apart, including the new Nintendo Switch. On the underside of each of the plastic buttons is a rubber pad. This is what allows the buttons to be pressed and then spring back up into place. The motherboard has little contact pads on the surface, and like any Switch, when the 2 sides of each button area are connected with this conductive material, the Sega console gets a signal that the button has been pressed. The rubber pads each have their own black conductive area on the bottom. Pretty smart design. No mechanical parts or springs to get lost or jammed, just rubber, which should last for a pretty long time. The way the cable ties into the back of the controller, though, are not quite as strong as what we saw inside of the Nintendo controllers. This only has one point of contact, and could probably be broken if twirled around or thrown. The Nintendo controller cables were much more secure. The cable was wrapped around inside of a few posts inside of the controller before extending out the top, so don't abuse the controllers too much. Basically, if your mom never let you have a gaming console growing up, now's your chance to buy the mini versions of all of them. The Sega Mini is like $50 on Amazon right now. I'll put a link in the description. And if your mom ever comes over, you can just hide them all real quick since they're so small. She'll never even know. Personally, I think this thing is pretty awesome, and thumbs up to Sega for making a comeback. Now I think I want to see a mini Nintendo 64 with its 64-bit graphics. Now if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go look up cheat codes for the Christmas light hanging game, because I definitely lost my last round. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Come hang out with me on Instagram and Twitter. And thanks a ton for watching. I'll see you around.